All right, good morning, everyone. Once again, I want to thank the Northwest Ohio Osteopathic Association for having me. It's always a pleasure. Normally, we have this conference at Kalahari, and it's a lot of fun, but obviously, due to COVID this year, we're not going to be able to do that. I see some names that I recognize, some of the people where I work out in Delta, Ohio, and Wasion, Ohio. Just as a brief introduction, I graduated from Chicago Osteopathic College of Medicine. I'm a professor of medicine at Ohio University and Midwestern University in Chicago. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, Northwest Ohio. I have privileges at almost every hospital in all of Northwest Ohio. I belong to a group called Toledo Cardiology Consultants, and I've been working with mostly Mercy System for the last 8 years, and also ProMedica when our patients end up there. So briefly, this lecture, I would say, is about 20 years in the making. I've always been a big into athletics and fitness and weight loss and working out. I am a certified personal trainer as well as a cardiologist. I do have patients. Almost all of my patients need to lose weight, and we've spent a lot of time together trying to lose weight. This is my most requested talk. If you miss it or you want to watch it over again, it will be on YouTube. If you just go to drallo.tv, you can watch it there. There's already a version of it on there. This one's a little more updated because a lot has changed. Well, not a lot has changed, but some things have changed, and there's a few more studies I included in this one. But either way, we'll get started. If you have any questions, I do have the question and answer box open. Just type them in. I'll look over there every once in a while, or we can do them at the end either way. But just put them in there and we'll try to get to them. I do have my mouse here. So I do not have any disclosures. None of the companies of any of the medications or things we talk about pay me for anything. I wish they did, but nobody does. So the objectives are to understand the scope and cost of the obesity problem, go over the latest research on proven weight loss methods, how to implement a successful weight loss program into your practice. There are prescription medications that do help with weight loss. And then how to use apps and technology for weight loss, some final takeaways, and then we get into questions and answers. Obviously, it's a lot more involved than just these 7 things, but we'll get started here. So this slide is mainly because you'll be scrolling on Facebook or social media, and there's always an advertisement for like the greatest secret to fat loss or weight loss. Click on this one thing to lose your belly fat, or eat this one thing this way to lose this and lose that. Unfortunately, as you see, or you'll see, there's no secret to weight loss. It's not like this. There's no magic pill you can take. There's no thing you can smoke. There's no button you can press. There is no secret to weight loss. I wish there was, then we wouldn't have obesity at all. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Weight loss can be done, and almost every patient and client should be able to do it. I've had some of my friends, I said I'm also like a bodybuilder, a personal trainer. I've had people get down to the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% body fat percentages. So it is doable, but you got to be willing to put in the discipline and the work. And we can use a lot of this stuff on our patients. Unfortunately, a lot of the medications we prescribe have as a side effects weight gain, and some of them have as a side effect weight loss. So sometimes those are competing medications. I might put them on something for their heart. Somebody puts them on something for anxiety or depression. Mine causes weight loss or weight gain, and theirs does the opposite. So the biggest thing that we want to distinguish is we don't want to lose just weight. If you lose weight, that could be muscle, that could be bone density, that could be a lot of things. We don't want to lose lean body mass. We want to lose just fat. And there are ways to get the body to lose just fat. And we'll get into a lot of those later. So this is normally when I ask the crowd, has anybody successfully lost weight? And a lot of people raise their hands. How did you do it? People will discuss usually different things. Well, I did this, or I tried keto, I tried elimination type diets, and we'll go through all of that. The biggest problem in our country is not weight loss. A lot of people can initially lose weight. We've had almost everybody that I know has lost some weight at some point, but the biggest problem is keeping it off. So that would be the next question. How did you keep it off? Why did you decide to lose weight? A lot of people, you want to know their why. Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to get healthy? Why? And then in your practice, how many patients do you see just for weight management alone? This is a huge area where we could expand our practices, where we see patients once a month for weight loss, whether they're on medications or just to get just some accountability when they know they're getting weighed, they know they need to stick to the plan you gave them. So if you see patients on a monthly basis or every other month for weight loss, that's huge. And some of the medications that we prescribe require monthly check-ins. So we'll get into that. This is me and 3 of my kids. This is just to illustrate that kids learn from you. You set the example. If they see you running every day or you working out every day, they will come and emulate you. And it's important to instill these habits early on. This is my 5-year-old. She saw me doing something with the older kids. They put a bunch of plates on my back, and she decided she wanted to do the same thing. Don't worry, no children were hurt during the making of this photo op. Those were like 2-pound plates and the cute gloves that she found. This was me. I would say this was February 2019 to about July, like around July. So about 6-7 months or so. This is probably the picture over here. Probably the worst picture I've ever found of myself. I don't even know where I found it. I didn't think I looked that bad, but clearly I did. And then this is later on after so it's like 6 months and about 47 or 45 pounds worth of difference. The scope of the obesity problem is huge. This is all from the CDC website. And if you download the slides later on, you can toggle on the studies. If you want to toggle on the notes, every one of these things that's stated in here, the source website or study is listed in the notes, if not right directly on the slide. So 79% of adults are overweight, 22% of adults are considered obese, 16.6% of children 2 to 19 years of age are overweight, 5.6% are obese, 12% of children that are even younger, 2 to 5 years of age, are also overweight. Now, you've all seen these from the CDC website in the 1990s. If you look at this, less than 10% of self-reported people were considered overweight, which is a BMI of 30. And then, some of the blue here in the 15 to 19% range. As the years went on, we kept having to add more and more colors. 2004, we've had to add a bigger one for 25% or more. As time went on, 2011, you see more and more of the darker orange colors, which now is in the 30 to 35% range. 2018, we had to add even more colors. These are 35% obesity rates or higher. And now 2016 to 18, almost the entire Midwest and South and Southeast is pretty much this dark maroon color, which is greater than 35%. If you look at the trends over time from the 1960s up until about 2014, you'll notice that overweight men and women has stayed about the same. The percentage of men that are overweight and women that are overweight is about the same. However, the obese numbers have gone up significantly. We started around the 10 and 15% range and have made it all the way up into the 39 and 40% range. And then the extreme obesity, these are people with a BMI greater than 40. These numbers have climbed as well. It used to be, 1, maybe 2% down here, and it's gone up into the 9 to 10% over time. So the trends are increasing. Same thing for youth and children. If you look at 1999 even, 13.9% overweight, and now we're almost at 20% as time has gone on, and the numbers have eclipsed that now. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. I'm assuming you can. Chicago, at the time when I lived there in 2006, was considered the fattest city in the U.S. And then when I moved to Lucas County a few years later, Lucas County in Ohio was considered the fattest county in all of Ohio. So maybe I should stop moving so much. So if you look at the statistics, in 1980, 46% of U.S. adults aged 20 and older were overweight or obese. By 99, it was 60%. A lot of this is due to this highly palatable, highly calorie-dense food. We used to supersize everything. That's not really a thing now anymore. There was greater consumption of high-fat, calorie-dense food. Food was low cost, great tasting, energy-dense. Also, as time goes on, physical activity has decreased, although gym memberships has actually increased. From the 1980s until now, gym memberships in the U.S. have gone up, while actual physical activity in general has gone down. At any given time, 44% of women and 29% of men admit to being dieting. And Americans spend about $50 billion a year on weight loss products, programs, and pills. And we'll get into if any of that is even effective. I'm guessing you know that it's probably not. But so the cost of obesity, I'm not going to go through every single one of these because it's just long and wordy. You can read this later on your own. 147 billion overall. The cost related to heart disease is 8.8 billion, type 2 diabetes, 98 billion. Osteoarthritis, this is all like your joint replacements, your hips and knees and ankles and back and spine surgeries, 21 billion. Hypertension, 4.1 billion. Gallbladder disease, 3.4 billion. Cancers, breast cancer, 2.9 billion. Endometrial, 933 million. Colon cancer, 3.5 billion. Now the costs due to lost productivity at work are rather interesting. This is like you had a heart attack or stroke or needed back surgery or a knee replacement and you had to take days off work, or you got sick from like hypertensive urgency or whatever it might be. The costs are also tremendous. 3.9 billion. Work days lost, 39.3 million. Physician office visits, 62.7 million. Restricted activity days, like if we tell them they got to be on light duty for the next 20 days or whatever, 239 million. Bed days, like, this is when you stay home, is 89.5 million. So this is just like a graphic of all the different body parts and systems that are affected by obesity. It's obviously a disease that affects every single system in the body in a multitude of different ways. My department is over here with the diabetes and dyslipidemia, but someone may be a cancer doctor or a gynae, or family even does a lot of this, liver, GI stuff, pulmonary disease. I mean, obstructive sleep apnea now is the number one cause of difficult to control high blood pressure. And obviously the strokes and heart attacks and all the other stuff. So the other complications that no one talks about are, for example, like not fitting in a CT scanner. We do treadmill stress tests or echocardiograms even. A lot of the patients, their weight is so heavy that the treadmill can't do their weight. We have a weight limit of 450 pounds on some of these treadmills, or 600 in some other ones. And then the nuclear camera, the table weight is also like about 400 pounds. So a lot of times there are these complications of obesity that are non-medical. If you have abdominal surgery and you don't heal properly, we see this all the time in the hospital. And we see this with cardiac patients as well. When they get open heart surgery, sometimes we have to leave the wound open for a few days. Medical emergencies, do they have a gurney or a stretcher that can carry you out? Is the door wide enough to carry you out? We've all seen those TV shows where someone is so big that they have to cut a hole through the wall to get them out. Difficulty dosing medications. This is huge. Like if I put somebody on carvedilol 25 twice a day, but they weigh 350 pounds and it was never tested in somebody with such a high BMI, is my medication even effective? Is the concentration of it proper in their bloodstream? We may not know. And that's why you sometimes see 37.5 or 50 of carvedilol. Operating tables have weight limits as well, and then not fitting in an airplane. There's all kinds of things, seat belts and stuff like that are safety related and health related, but are not actually technically medical. So diets failing, 50 to 70% of people regain their weight in 1 year, 85% in 2 years, 95% in 3 years. Depending on the study or survey you look at, 33 to up to 66% will add back more weight than they lost. But there is this small 3 to 5% of people who will lose weight and keep it off after 5 years. That's what we want for ourselves and for our patients. So we will definitely be talking about how to get to that point. So is it this simple? A lot of times we want to blame the patients that they're just can't control their eating habits and are greedy and gluttonous and just eat. Is it simply energy intake has to be less than energy expenditure, or you store fat? So in a lot of ways it is this simple, but in a lot of ways it's actually not this simple. So we'll go through a lot of that. This I wanted to put in here. I'm sure you've all heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You've all had that resident that read one study and came back and said, Dr. Allo, I know the solution to obesity. You just got to eat snails. What? You look at the study and you're like, okay, that's one study literally out of hundreds of thousands of studies that we've done on obesity. Or a patient will come to me, and this happens all the time, and they'll say, I read this book, or I watched this documentary, I'm never going to eat this again, or I'm going to do this, or I unlocked the code to longevity. Okay, reading one study or one book or a handful of things here and there is really not the solution. I mean, this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Somebody reads a few things and learns a couple things about something, their confidence goes way up. But then as you read and learn more about it, and you read more and more studies and more books, you finally start to understand what's actually going on. And then eventually you become an expert. The reason I put this up is because there's literally hundreds of thousands of studies that have been done on weight loss. And every time somebody wants to prove something works, they can easily, fund a study or run a study. But you got to look at really good studies, really good meta-analyses. The problem with these weight loss studies is that they're not done in metabolic wards, and we'll get into metabolic wards later. But metabolic ward studies are usually the best for this kind of thing. A lot of my patients ask me, well, what makes you an expert on weight loss? I tell them, look, I've read almost every research study you can imagine on weight loss, and almost every book published on obesity or weight loss since the 1980s until now, and a lot of them even much older than that. The problem is there's a new book published every day by somebody trying to make money on some new weight loss or new diet. So metabolic studies, they're called metabolic ward studies. These are the best studies. Metabolic ward studies, the participants are basically locked into a metabolic ward. It's basically like a jail. They're not allowed to leave. They use double labeled water, which there's a description of it at the bottom if you want to look at it. Because we do it this way, we can quantify the amount of food you eat, the water you drink, your intake, your output very accurately. We can quantify your basic metabolic rate, your calories in, calories out, total daily energy expenditure, NEAT, which is non-energy exercise thermogenesis, and EAT, which is the thermogenesis from the food that you've eaten. And we'll get into those in a little bit more detail in a bit. So unless the study was done in a metabolic ward, the studies where people are free roaming and kind of remember what they ate yesterday and don't really track, it's very difficult to draw any conclusions for that. Even for cardiovascular outcomes, you've got people saying, well, I remember 40 years ago that I used to eat a lot of olive oil. I'm like, oh yeah, so olive oil prevents atherosclerotic disease. Maybe not, but it's very difficult, especially with atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. It's very difficult to use recall studies or retrospective studies on what people thought they ate at the time for something that happens and develops 40 years later. So just be careful of the type of studies and the type of evidence people are using to justify their new diet book or new, technique that you have to buy or whatever it is. So what's more important? This is normally when I would ask the crowd on non-corona years, what is more important for your body composition, diet or exercise? 60-70% of the people raise their hand for diet, the other half probably for exercise. Then I would ask the audience, do you exercise? I know there's a hand raising feature here in Zoom. I don't know how to access it, but do you exercise? You can just kind of answer it yourself. The thing that doctors get criticized the most for is that we don't practice what we preach. I mean, we all know a pulmonologist that smokes and a cardiologist that's morbidly obese or whatever it might be. But definitely you want to sort of like look the part, I suppose. You wouldn't hire a physical therapist or a trainer to train you that didn't look like they knew what they were doing. So as a physician, I would say definitely try to incorporate some activity into your own daily life so that you know how hard it is. When a patient tells you, I walk on the treadmill on a 10% incline at 2.5 miles an hour, and you're like, oh, that's great. But actually, maybe it's not. Maybe it's really easy. So just make sure, you do some kind of activity so you can know what they're doing. So most of the research has shown that body composition is mostly diet, anywhere between 90 to 97% diet and maybe 3 to 10% at the most exercise dependent. And we'll get into this. So this is your total daily energy expenditure. It's made up of these things here. Your basal metabolic rate is if you laid down in a bed all day, you need this much energy just to keep the lights on. This is if you did absolutely nothing. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, this is movement that you do that is not exercise. It's not purposeful exercise. This is like me using my hands to talk, fidgeting, walking, the amount of steps a day that you use This is about 15% of your total daily energy expenditure. Thermic effect of food is the amount of energy it costs to eat the food that you've eaten, or to utilize and break down the food that you've eaten. And then exercise activity thermogenesis. This is actual purposeful exercise. This is like if you went on a hike or a bike ride or swimming or lifted weights or whatever it might be. So this is about 5% of your total daily energy expenditure. So this is the amount of calories you can burn doing 30 minutes of exercise if you weighed 110 pounds, 140, 187, and 220. So let's take a look at the person that burns the most. If you weigh 220 pounds and you ran at a pace of 7-minute miles for 30 minutes, you could burn 1,286 calories. If you did some bodybuilding, it'd be 551. You can kind of plug your numbers in here and kind of see, but this is mainly to show you about how much energy you would burn doing certain activities. Now we know that if you want to lose about a pound per week, you got to burn or figure out a way to eliminate 3,500 calories a week, which is about 500 a day. 3,500 divided by 7. So let's say you got a patient or a client that is strength training for 45 minutes. They burn 826 calories and they walk at 3 miles an hour for 15 minutes. They do this three times a week. Their weekly total daily energy expenditure is 2,900. Still doesn't add up to 3,500, which is what is required to burn 1 pound per week. So it's a very difficult thing to do, to tell patients, well, look, just run and lift weights every day and you'll be able to burn enough energy to lose a pound per week. It's not that easy. So there's a lot of studies on exercise and how well it caused weight loss. So this is the effects of aerobic versus resistance exercise without caloric restriction on abdominal fat, intrahepatic lipid, insulin sensitivity in obese adolescent boys. They did the study. After 3 months, exercise had very little impact. I'm not going to read the details of all these because they're very wordy. You can click through them and read them later. But after 3 months, exercise had very little impact on weight loss. The control group gained 2.6 kilograms. The aerobic exercise group lost 0.04, which is not very much. The resistance training group lost 0.6. So all of this, after 3 months, they lost a minimal amount of weight. This is another study, effects of aerobic or combined aerobic and resistance training exercise on body composition in overweight and obese adults, gender differences, randomized intervention study. At the conclusion of 12 weeks, the aerobic group lost 3.7 kilograms of body weight. The aerobic plus resistance training lost 3.8, so not really a huge difference there, which, although statistically significant, is less than 9 pounds. So even after 12 weeks of having people work, really hard at aerobics and or resistance training plus aerobics, there wasn't a huge amount of body weight loss. Well, 9 pounds is good in 12 weeks, but you'll see later on that this is not usually something that's sustainable or works long term. So this is a 16-month trial. They took participants and they had them burn off about 2,000 calories a week doing various programs. At the conclusion of the study, the men in the exercise group had only lost 5.2 kilograms, while the women lost 0.4. Now we know women have a much lower basic metabolic rate or metabolism. A lot of it is due to their less lean body mass in general. But at the conclusion of the study, you're looking at 10, 12 pounds of weight loss. This is 16 months. This is almost like a year and a half. Another meta-analysis here found that the mean weight loss of men who completed 30 weeks of exercise was a measly 2.6 kilograms. Women, similarly, about 3 kilograms over the course of the 14 weeks. So that there was 30 weeks for the men and about 14 for the women. Still not a huge ton of weight loss. It did help, but it's not a lot. Another study here looked at the effects of anti-obesity drugs and exercise on weight loss maintenance after a very low-calorie diet or low-calorie diet. Anti-obesity drugs, meal replacements, and high-protein diets were associated with improved weight loss maintenance after a very low calorie or low-calorie period, whereas no significant improvements were seen for dietary supplements and exercise. So when you took somebody on a low-calorie diet or a very low-calorie diet and you added on supplements, for example, whether it was protein or whatever they tested, and you added exercise, there wasn't a huge significant improvement or effect compared to just the diet alone. So one thing that we have discovered about exercise is that it helps you not gain weight back that you've already lost. So if you've lost 40 pounds and you're walking every day or you run once a week, that helps you not gain that weight back. And this is the study here. Regular exercise attenuates the metabolic drive to regain weight after long-term weight loss. The exercise decreased the rate of regain early in relapse and lowered the defended body weight. Your body likes to protect or defend its body weight. And if you got to 150 pounds over, the last half a year, your body will now want you to stay at around 150 pounds. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So then they thought, well, what if we don't focus on the actual weight loss? Because there's not a whole lot of weight loss from exercise. What if we told people, look, you've got better aerobic capacity, your blood pressure improved, your insulin resistance improved, and all of that. They did demonstrate a decrease in aerobic capacity, decreased systolic and diastolic blood pressure, waist circumference, resting heart rate, and a lot of other things. So they decided that, well, we can't really say, well, look, you're going to lose a ton of weight if you exercise, but we can say, hey, look, you can improve all of your cardiovascular risk factors and other things that we can look at. So diet and exercise interventions versus combined behavioral weight management programs, a systemic review and meta-analysis of direct comparison. So this study wanted to look at what if we did dietary behavioral interventions. Like every few weeks, the patient would check in with us. They talk with a nutritionist and a psychologist, and we talk to them about diet and how important it is. Programs based on physical activity alone were less effective than combined with these behavioral weight management programs in both the short and long term. So when you add in a diet counseling every few weeks or in this period, it helps tremendously with the weight loss, more so than just the activity alone. Long-term effectiveness of diet plus exercise interventions versus diet-only interventions for weight loss. This is another meta-analysis. So even in the long-term studies, and we're talking like 2 years, that showed exercise plus diet worked, it was 0.5 to 1.14 kilograms of weight loss over 2 years. That's really not a lot. So if you tell a patient, hey, look, I'm going to put you on an exercise program, it's a great program, you might lose 2 pounds in 2 years. In my 200 to 300 pound patients, that's just not going to cut it. There has to be a more efficient and faster way to cause weight loss. I'm never going to tell my patients not to exercise because I'm a cardiologist. It's part of my name. But we'll look at what exercise does do in a bit. Another meta-analysis, the effect of dietary counseling for weight loss. The conclusions, dietary counseling interventions produce modest weight loss that diminish over time. So once you stop talking to the patients about diet, over time, it kind of goes away. So this is another study. It's published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They did a control group, which they did nothing with. There was a calorie restriction group, which is this greenish blue line here, and a calorie restriction alone. With the calorie restriction with exercise, calorie restriction alone, you'll notice that they both lost about 8 kilograms. The group with exercise, slightly less. The group with only calorie restriction, slightly more, maybe 8.5. And then a very low calorie diet group, they lost the most weight the fastest. They lost about 11 kilograms. So this is just to demonstrate that whether you add in exercise or not, the weight loss is about the same. And the group that restricted calories alone maybe even lost a little bit more weight than the group that just that added in exercise. So almost regardless of anything else, it's the calories that seem to matter. So they used to have this linear model. If we assume this is your total energy expenditure in the day, this is all the other stuff we talked about, your BMR, your NEAT, your food thermogenesis, and all the other stuff. And then this is physical activity. So theoretically speaking, in this old model, if you increase your physical activity, you could burn an unlimited amount of calories. Now we know that that's not true. If this was true and I ran 18 hours a day, theoretically I could burn 50,000 calories, which obviously doesn't matter and is not even possible. So now we have this constrained model where you can burn calories up to a certain point. Let's say you start jogging or walking every day, your body will burn extra calories up to a certain point, but it's capped or constrained, and then it'll start taking away energy from NEAT, your non-energy activity thermogenesis. This is like you fidgeting, the amount of steps you take. So if you do more physical activity, your body might not have you use your hands as much to talk, or have you rest more, not get up and walk and pace, whatever it might be. And this is the study that has shown those, that there's a constrained total energy expenditure model, that you cannot just run more or lift more weights and burn more calories to an infinite degree. There's a cap to it, and after a certain point, you just cannot burn anymore. Your body starts to take away from other areas. This is a study on exercise and its effect on your appetite. The key points are physical activity does more than just increase total energy expenditure. When activity is low, appetite is dysregulated. That's why we see like some people, when they exercise, it actually increases their appetite, and some people when they exercise, it actually decreases their appetite. So if somebody who is just starting with physical activity, they may actually eat more because their appetite is not that well controlled yet. The combination of being too high in body fat and also being physically inactive may further dysregulate appetite and satiety signaling. We know that people that are really, really obese, their appetite is completely dysregulated. And a lot of times they tell you, well, I only eat this much or that much. And it turns out, they're eating a whole lot more, and activity may or may not really help them. Physical activity and exercise may only be effective to a point for the goal of weight loss. At very high levels of physical activity, additional increases may not result in an increase in total energy expenditure, but rather a downregulation of energy expended from other components of total energy expenditure and no change in net expenditure. So what we know is that if you exercise so much, like, these people that are training for marathons or, running a 5K every couple of days, your body actually lowers your BMR and you use less calories to do that activity. And they've done studies where people wear the mask, and they measure your CO2 output to know exactly how many calories you're burning on the bike or whatever it is. They found that they put you on a treadmill or a bike, the first time, let's say you'll burn 300 calories. The next time you do the same amount, you'd be 250, then 200, then 180. But your body slowly down regulates the amount of energy it needs. It becomes more efficient with calories and more efficient with your metabolic resting rate, so that you don't have to use as much energy to do the same type of activity. Plus, you adapt to it because you've become better at cardiovascular endurance. So your body adapts to the exercise to the point where you are burning very few calories, and because you're in better shape, it becomes easier for you, and you don't need to expend as many calories as well. So these patients of mine, or physique athletes that are training for shows or whatever, they are like, well, I run every day, or I walk 2 miles a day. I burn 300 calories. Well, you may have burned 300 calories the first time you did it, but every subsequent time you do that, and it gets easier and easier, you're not actually burning that many calories. Your body downregulates that and adapts. Physical activity, I see your question, Jay Berry, just give me a second. Physical activity, total and regional obesity, and dose response considerations. I highlighted some of the parts, you can read them, but what this shows is basically exercise can cause fat loss short term. When somebody first starts an exercise program, you burn more calories and you haven't developed that efficiency with calories yet. And you will burn more calories in the first 2 to 3 months, but once you're adapted, you're no longer causing fat loss. We see this all the time. I've had friends that are like, you know what, I'm going to start running. They join a running group, they start training for something, they're running every day. They lose like 10, 15 pounds right off the bat. And then, 4 or 5 months later, they're not losing any more weight. I see them 6, 7 months later, and they put on all the weight back, even though they're still doing the same amount of activity. So exercise, the amount of exercise you'd have to do to lose weight is usually time prohibitive. If you want to burn that 500 calories a day, for most people, depending on how much you weigh, you'd have to jog or walk or swim or bike or whatever for 5 to 6 miles a day. That could take 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. The amount of energy you can burn from physical activity is capped and constrained, so it's not unlimited like we've seen in the studies. You cannot just say, well, I'll just run 8 hours a day. Whoa, you're not going to burn 8,000 calories the more times and longer you run. So exercise is good at keeping lost weight off, but will not help you lose new weight. It can in the beginning, but not forever. Eating less and healthier is the key. Exercise suppresses and or increases appetite. We talked about appetite dysregulation depending on how lean or how obese you are. Exercise activates fight or flight response and puts the rest digest system on hold. Lowers cardiovascular mortality significantly, and exercise alone without a diet intervention is ineffective for weight loss. We know that exercise, as a cardiologist, of course, I'm never going to tell my patients not to exercise. Like I said, I'm a cardiologist. It's in my name. But it lowers your blood pressure, your LDL, your blood sugar, increases your HDL, prevents weight regain, increases and or decreases hunger, depending on the person and how lean or not lean they are. It does activate compensatory adaptive mechanisms, which we're going to talk about how to break that metabolic adaptation. But it does not cause a significant amount of weight loss. Definitely not long term. Initially, when somebody starts, it can, and it helps, but not for very long. There was a study in 2014 running at even a very slow pace for 5 to 10 minutes, just once or twice a week, decreased cardiovascular mortality by 45%. Doing it every day reduces mortality by 50%. So this is the first time they showed like a dose response to actual running. And this was not like intense running. I think the most they did was like 2.5 miles to 4 miles per hour. It wasn't like, somebody running a 10-minute, 7-minute mile or anything. And it reduced all-cause mortality by 29%. So the chance of you getting hit by a truck and dying also went down. So the question is now, I get a lot of patients, they ask me, do the commercial programs work? Can I get like Nutrisystem or Jenny Craig? Can I buy something to help? So with the exception of one trial of Weight Watchers, the evidence to support the use of major commercial and self-help weight loss programs was suboptimal. And I've noticed that too in my practice. I'm sure you have too. My patients that actually did Weight Watchers and kind of still stick to the point system are probably the only ones that have actually lost weight on their own without any interventions or got diet counseling or whatever it is. So do dietary supplements work? We spend about $50 billion a year on dietary supplements. I'm pretty sure you probably all know the answer to this, because if it actually worked, it would be a prescription drug. Almost any diet supplement that works or herb or whatever it is, we turn it into $1 billion prescription. But the studies have said, conclusion here, they do not enhance weight loss attempts. So then the question becomes, is it just a matter of calories in versus calories out, or CICO or KICO, CICO, however you want to pronounce it? So we've said that 97% can be achieved with diet alone. Exercise is good for cardiovascular health, but not necessary for weight loss. So my biggest thing that I tell physicians and residents and interns and fellows is, look, don't say diet and exercise. When you add in the and exercise part, you're giving patients a built-in excuse to think that they can never, ever lose weight. Now, why is that? So imagine my 285-pound or 350-pound patient, and I tell him, well, yeah, you want to lose weight, it's easy, just diet and exercise. And then he looks at me and he's thinking to himself, I can't even get out of a chair. What type of exercise do you think that I could possibly do? Or I have a walker, or I am on crutches, or my knee is bad, or my hips are bad, or I can't get out of bed every morning. How am I supposed to exercise? So don't give patients a built-in excuse to think they can never lose weight. Tell them, listen, and we'll go through the prescription of what you should tell them later. But look, just cut back on your calories. Here's a diet plan. Once they've dropped 10, 15, maybe 20 pounds, and they can actually get up and do activity, start them on walks, things like that, then we can get them to eventually add in the exercise portion. But don't tell them that the only way to lose weight is diet and exercise, because they could lose weight on diet and nothing. So definitely don't do that. So there's different kinds of exercise. Obviously, there's aerobics and then there's resistance training. So assuming you weigh 200 pounds, if you walk or jog for 3 miles, you'll burn about 300 calories. That's one plain bagel with cheese from Panera. A 200-pound person just squatting their own body weight for 2 minutes straight also burns about 320 calories. So you can choose what's more efficient: 2 minutes of weights, about 45 minutes of walking and or jogging, or just not putting the plain bagel with cheese in your mouth. Obviously, the fastest, easiest way to reduce those 300 calories is to not eat the bagel. So the exercise, weights and resistance training, is much more effective than running on a treadmill. It does increase your BMR. If you put on, they say that if you put on 1 pound of muscle, you increase your BMR by 60 to 80 calories. So if you put on 5 pounds, and let's say you just started working out and you put on a few pounds of muscle, even 5 pounds, that could increase your BMR by about 200 to 300 calories. So now your body requires 200 to 300 more calories just to sustain that muscle. Even if you don't increase your food intake, your body will start to lose weight. Or if you are in a calorie deficit, then you've increased your calorie deficit by an extra 200 to 300. Explosive runs and sprints are more muscle building and increase your BMR more so than low, steady cardio on a treadmill or long walks. This is especially true for women and people with low metabolism. You want to try to get your BMR up. There's a lot of people that are like, my metabolism is just so low. If I eat, 1,200 calories, I gain weight. That's a huge problem. And those are the most difficult patients, but we definitely have solutions for that. So lift weights to burn calories, not directly. I mean, you will burn some calories lifting weights, but more so because you've increased your BMR over time. So the nice thing about weight training is that anyone can do it. And we do it every day, whether you stand up off a chair, you reach to the ground to grab something, you just got to slowly increase those weights. Not everyone can run or swim. Not everyone has access to a pool. And then running is a very complex motion. You can't just take a couch potato. And I see this all the time where people in their 30s or 40s that did not play sports and when they were younger suddenly get up and they want to start a running program. And they have the wrong form, their knees hurt, they get plantar fasciitis, they get their iliotibial band all sore, their hamstrings hurt, their knee pain. You can't just take everyone and tell them to run. Most of my patients could never run. I'm sure the same goes for many of you. But a weight training program, almost anyone can do. It increases your BMR, improves strength, mobility, improves quality of life. Imagine if that patient you had that could barely get out of a chair is now able to get out of a chair every day, doesn't need to use their walker anymore. It also improves your body composition. Body composition is your body fat percentage to lean mass ratio. So you build a little more muscle and you lose a little more fat, which improves the way your aesthetics and the way you look, and it improves functionality. They can now go to the store and buy groceries without the walker or without somebody watching them all the time. This is just a graphic I found online. This guy did diet and cardio only. He says, I look thin, his body fat levels went down, but he also lost muscle mass. There is this interference effect for people who do excessive amounts of cardio. It does prevent you from gaining muscle if you're also lifting weights. This guy did diet and weights. He got a little more muscular, thinks he looks lean, body fat went down, muscle mass likely went up. Same thing here. You've got a female at 150 pounds and 35% body fat compared to 150 pounds at 20% body fat. This person wanted to lose weight, so they did a restrictive fad diet. They did cardio and they were obsessed with calories. This person did high protein diet, moderate carbs and fats, strength training, and eventually got stronger. And we'll get into the details of this and how it works a little bit later. So if you're going to give your patients an exercise prescription, include some cardio and resistance training. Now, it depends on the patient, obviously. If your patient barely can get out of a chair or can barely do anything, then give them things that are, simple to do. If they're like an average, fair functional capacity or average functional capacity patient, have them start walking every day, after dinner or early in the morning. And then slowly increase that. They can do it on an incline or, whatever it is eventually. You can add in resistance training. Start at an appropriate intensity. You don't want them going crazy right off the bat because that's not sustainable. They'll get sick of it and they'll get bored and they won't continue. You want to pick things that are easy to do that they can maintain long term. Start with more cardio in the beginning, transition to more resistance training over time if they need to. If they're young, I'm sure you guys see a lot of younger patients. I don't, but most of my patients are older. But you guys have younger patients. Start them in the resistance training with the cardio together. Increase the weights over time. That's called progressive overload. If they're squatting 100 pounds today, try to make it 110 the next week, et cetera. And then adapt over time. Your body and your prescription for them, it should adapt to what they're able to do. If they say, well, this feels too light, or this, I can go faster or further, then adapt to that. Let them do that. So this is just a chart of how much fat are you burning versus glycogen or sugar. Depending on the intensity level of your exercise. We know that low steady state cardio, you're relying mostly on fat. So if somebody gets on a treadmill, gets their heart rate over 100, but not over 125 or 130 at the most, they walk for like an hour or two, you're burning mostly fat. You're relying mostly on fat. If you start doing moderate level activity or like these high intensity interval training, sprints, etc., those hit intervals or circuits, you're using mostly your glycogen from your muscles and very, very little fat. So if somebody wants to actually burn off fat, you tell them go on these long, slow walks, get your heart rate over 100, but no more than maybe 130, depending on their age. and that should do the trick. This is another graph kind of showing the same thing. The longer you are doing these activities, the more likely you are to rely on fat. If you do like an explosive sprint that takes just a few seconds to do, you're using your carbohydrates and glycogen from your muscles. If you're going on a slow, long walk, or running, or jogging for a very long distance, the longer you're doing it, the more you're relying on fat. So is it just a matter of calories in versus calories out, CICO or CICO? My argument would be no, it's just calories in. The calories in part we can change. The calories out part needs to be taken out because that's the part that's really hard to do, and it's not that much. No matter how much you run or how much you lift weights, you're not going to burn 5,000 to 10,000 calories a day the more you do that. So that part is constrained. Only about 5% of your total daily energy expenditure is the out part. So we won't focus on it. So another study here, fat loss depends on energy deficit only independently of the method for weight loss. So whether you did diet alone or diet combined with aerobic training, independent of what you did, a negative energy balance or calorie deficit alone is responsible for weight reduction. And this, I think, is the key to what we're trying to get to. Basically, the calories in or the calorie deficit is the most important part, whether you had a lot of calories out or not a lot of calories out. And we'll get into the details later. This other study, randomized trial comparing low fat and low carbohydrate diets matched for energy and protein. This is very, very important. If you have an isocaloric diet and the protein is kept the same, it doesn't really matter if you do a very low carb diet or a very low fat diet or what the other macronutrients are. But down here, if you read this, if you keep calories and protein the same, it's isocaloric and they're in a deficit. It makes no difference if you eat a very low carb or low fat diet, you'll still lose the same amounts of weight. Now, initially, they did show in some of the early studies on Atkins type diets that initially the people on the very low carb diets lose a little bit more weight up front, but by about 6 or 8 months, they're about the same. So the more muscle you have, the more you are protected against cardiovascular mortality. This is in relation to your body fat percentage. It protects against cancers, protects against chronic illness. They found that people who are leaner or have more muscle mass, I should say, compared to their body fat percentage, have shorter stays in the ICU. They're able to fight chronic illnesses better. They're all around just more healthy. So let's talk diet. I think this is a part most people are kind of waiting for. 1943, they had this. I'm not going to go through all of these. Later, 92, they changed it to a pyramid, and you've all seen this, I'm sure. 2005, they added a man running up the stairs to kind of emphasize activity as also being important. You can't just sit at home and eat these things and think that's it. Later, they changed it to a visual, which makes sense. You kind of see, well, this is how much of each I should eat. These are all great. They can be abused. You can still eat like this and be 300 pounds. We've seen that all the time. So just a quick review of the previous diets. You have these portion control diets like Weight Watchers, zone diets, prepared food diets where they send you your food, Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, those kind of things. Low carb and high protein, Atkins, South Beach, and keto now. Liquid fad diets, if you eat just cabbage soup for 3 months. Mediterranean diet, which is a balanced diet. It's more like whole grains and lean meats and nuts and stuff like that. It is the most proven. Raw food type of diets like paleo, hallelujah, God diet, caveman diets. And these are all diets where, like, if it existed back then or if God made it, then you can eat it. If God didn't make it, then you shouldn't eat it. The glycemic index type diets where you look at the low, high glycemic index foods, intermittent fasting, which is like kind of taken off recently. And then these elimination diets where you take out certain food groups or certain foods and see what happens. I will say that I'm not dogmatic. You can do almost any one of these and it will work for some time. Almost every one of these will work for some time. Comparison of weight loss diets with different composition of fat, protein, and carbohydrates. The conclusion here, reduced calorie diets result in clinically meaningful weight loss regardless of which macronutrients they emphasize. So it doesn't matter if you want to eat more fat, if you want to eat, you could look at the percentages that they broke it down here. You want to have a higher fat or a higher carb or a higher protein diet, whatever you do, if you're in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. And it makes no difference what the composition of those nutrients are. We all know the Pop-Tart diet and the McDonald's diet where people ate literally just Pop-Tarts or McDonald's for 30 days or 3 months, and they did lose weight as long as they were in a calorie deficit. Not the healthiest thing on earth, and you might not like how you look when it's all said and done, but it does work. Another study here, the specific composition of macronutrients, whether it's fat, protein, or carbohydrate in diets, isn't as important for cardiovascular risk reduction as long as a diet is effective in causing weight loss. And you'll see later that regardless of anything else, if the weight is coming off, your cardiovascular risk factors improve. So this one, very low carb versus isocaloric, high carbohydrate diet in dietary rats. When the energy intake was matched, the very low carbohydrate, high fat diet provided no advantage in weight loss or improving those components of the metabolic syndrome induced by dietary obesity and may delay loss of hepatic and visceral fat as compared with the high carb, low fat diet. Another study here, this study does not support the contention that low fat, low glycemic index diets are more beneficial than high glycemic index diets with regard to appetite or body weight regulation. A lot of people say, well, I want to eat low glycemic index foods or high glycemic index foods. The fact of the matter is, study after study, if you're in a calorie deficit, it almost doesn't matter whether you eat high glycemic index foods or low glycemic index foods. There's been so many studies that have refuted that model. So this is just a graphic I found online. No matter what you call your diet, if it creates a calorie deficit, then it works. Now, the problem is I'll get a lot of patients that come and say, well, yeah, I've been doing keto for the last 3 months and I lost 17 pounds, but now I'm stuck and they're like 240 pounds now and they want to be like 180 or 170. The problem with those diets where you really don't track or keep, eat according to a schedule or track anything, is that eventually those high fat diets, because fat is so calorie dense, your total caloric intake is going to match your total caloric needs, and you're going to stop. You're not going to lose any more weight. You have to find another way of breaking through that, which we'll get into. I'm sure you all know the glycemic index. I'm just going to skip this. There's high, low, and medium. This study provides no evidence to support an effect of reduced glycemic index diet on satiety, energy intake, or body weight in overweight or obese women. Claims that the GI of the glycemic index of the diet per se may have specific effects on body weight may therefore be misleading. We kind of talked about that earlier. No significant difference in weight loss or insulin resistance from low-fat keto. However, low-fat keto caused several adverse metabolic and emotional effects. So they've also looked at, keto diets and how they affect, for example, insulin resistance or weight loss. And they found in multiple studies, and this is just one I pulled up really quickly, that if you're in a calorie deficit, it really doesn't matter what the composition of those calories are. So what is the healthiest diet? There's, almost every type of diet in the world has been studied. There's literally hundreds of studies that show that the Mediterranean style diet, which is a balanced diet for the most part. I'm sure you've all read about it. It's like a lot of greens, some nuts, some vegetables, some beans, very lean meats, olive oils, low saturated fat type stuff. And it reduces mortality risk, lowers the incidence of cardiovascular disease. Another one showed that the Mediterranean diet, significant reduction in new cancers and overall mortality. Another study showed this is a randomized trial comparing low-fat and low-carbohydrate diets matched for energy and protein. I think we kind of discussed this in a similar study earlier. Our results showed no significant weight loss, lipid, serum, insulin, or glucose differences between the two diets. So this is when you keep energy, like your total calories, the same and protein the same. It doesn't matter if it's low-fat or low-carb. All of these things get better and the patients lost weight. So cardiovascular risk, changes in weight loss, body composition, cardiovascular disease after altering macronutrient distributions during a regular exercise program in obese women. I just highlighted some of the results here. You can read them later. Regardless of what macronutrient breakdown you use, if you are losing weight, all of your cardiovascular risk factors improve. So this is like mainly I put these in here. So like you get a patient that comes to you and says, hey, look, I've had 3 stents, I've had a stroke, my cholesterol's through the roof. Is it okay for me to do the carnivore diet or this diet or that diet? If they're actually losing weight, you can argue that, yes, you can do it because all of your cardiovascular risk factors improve. Now, it's hard for me to recommend the keto style diets where they're eating a lot of saturated fat because I'm a cardiologist, and saturated fat without question raises your LDL. And high LDL, without question, correlates with more strokes and heart attacks. I'm not saying it causes it, but it correlates with more heart attacks and strokes. We know at LDL levels below 40 or 50, you almost will never have a heart attack or stroke. So this is just to remind us as physicians and clinicians and people who deal with this, is that their cardiovascular risk factors will improve if they're losing weight. The obesity in and of itself is a pro-inflammatory process and causes many of these metabolic derangements and cardiovascular risks to go up. So it's very, very important to get them to start losing weight. They can do a keto diet with non-saturated fats. I mean, you can use polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, but if they're actually losing weight, they should improve. And this is just another one. If you are overweight, the amount of red meat and saturated fat will affect cardiovascular risk. So a lot of people ask the question because, you know, it seems like everybody wants to like not blame saturated fat or red meat. And then, you know, every 5 minutes there's like a new study saying, well, you can eat red meat or you can't eat red meat or saturated fat. So the conclusion, I think, from everything I've read, if you're overweight and you're in a pro-inflammatory state, you should avoid saturated fat and red meat and all those things because it will worsen your cardiovascular outcomes, strokes and heart attacks, etc. If you're lean or close to your ideal body weight, you have a little more leeway with eating those things. Effects of total red meat intake on glycemic control. A cohort study examined the relationship between red meat, BMI, and inflammatory markers in 1,200 subjects. They did indeed find that red meat intake was associated with markers of inflammation. However, when they corrected for the differences in BMI, the associations between red meat and inflammatory markers were no longer significant, while the association between BMI and inflammation were. So the bigger you are, the heavier you are, the more inflammatory state you're going to be in. And once again, the best way we can help our patients after, number one, smoking cessation, number two would be lowering their body weight to as closest to their ideal body weight as they can. Smoking increases your risk of heart disease and stroke 20 times normal, and obesity is about 12 or 13 times normal. So they looked at long-term weight maintenance and cardiovascular risk factors are not different following weight loss on carbohydrate-restricted diets, high in either monosaturated fat or protein in obese hyperinsulinemic men and women. So there's basically no difference in CV risk factors between the two groups if they did these two different kinds of diets and actually lost weight. So cardiovascular risk conclusions: obesity and elevated BMI increase all inflammatory and CV risk factors. Calorie deficit and weight loss improve them all. Macronutrient breakdown makes almost no difference. Leaner individuals have less CV risk. I mean, this is all like common sense, but we have lots of studies to back this up now. So yo-yo dieting, this is kind of important. So they've, let me just get this to draw itself out. So they've taken people and put them on diets. The blue, this darker blue line is the fat-free weight or your lean body mass, and then the green line is your fat weight. So when you put people into semi-starvation for a number of weeks, they're calorie restricted and or starved, they will lose a lot of fat and some lean body mass, depending on how severe the calorie deficit is. Now, the problem is once you refeed them, or you let them eat however they want, they will regain some of their lean body mass back, but they gain back way more body fat. So this is why yo-yo dieting is terrible. Every cycle of this that you do, the more body fat you put on. This is before you decrease calories, your metabolic rate goes down, your lean body mass goes down, your fat mass goes down, you look pretty decent. And then afterwards, when you start regaining, all of that stuff goes back up. And we found that the first time you lose weight, you lose it at 1 times the rate, you regain rate at 2 times, you regain the weight 2 times the rate back. Next time you try to lose, you can only lose it about half the rate before. And then when you regain again, it goes up by 3 times. You regain the weight 3 times the rate before. So terrible way to lose weight is yo-yo dieting. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So why do diets fail? There's a lot of reasons. I mean, we've all been on diets. I'm sure you could add more to this list. People don't like calorie counting. Some of them are expensive. If you had to eat ribeye steak all day, difficult to follow. They're too extreme, unhealthy. They're not a good fit for you. You're fighting against your set point. Your body likes to defend its weight. and it wants to keep it. People lose interest after they plateau and they adapt. So your body will adapt to your new calorie count or your new level of activity. And then you'll plateau once it adapts, and then you get stuck. And we'll talk about how to break through that later. Or sometimes the calorie is too low. You can't take a 380-pound patient and be like, oh yeah, just eat 1,200 calories a day. You know, you'll lose a ton of weight. Well, sure, they'll lose a ton of weight initially. They'll lose weight pretty quickly up front, but then their body adapts to that 1,200 calories, and now you're stuck with a patient who's still 260 pounds, but is only eating 1,200 calories. Well, what do you do next? Tell them to eat 800? So you want to try to avoid that. Dr. Blackburn wrote a book. He's a Harvard professor. He says he spent 35 years studying obesity and weight loss, and he spent 4 years writing this book. He talks about having a set point. He says that you want to lose about 10% of your body weight and hold steady for 6 months and then repeat, because if you don't do that, your body tries to bring you back to your original weight. He's also the inventor of the Slim Fast shakes. There was a Vermont prison experiment in 1964. Thankfully, we can't do experiments on inmates anymore. They overfed half the inmates and underfed the other half. And they did that for 6 months, and they all either lost weight or gained weight, depending on what group they were in. Then they left them alone, and they all went back to their original weight. So there's this thought that your body likes to defend whatever weight you are at. The only way to break that is to get to a new weight and stay there for 6 to 9 months. Once you've reached that new weight, that's your new defended body weight. The Minnesota starvation study was actually done on celebrities that wanted to lose a lot of weight really, really quickly. Most of them had really bad outcomes, whether it was lots of nausea and vomiting, malabsorption, all kinds of things. You don't want to lose weight too quickly. You want to do it slow and steady over time. So they say that your weight is set by age 18. You gain about a pound per year from ages 20 to 50. Your body works really hard to protect itself from quick short-term weight gain and weight loss. This is the reason why it's hard to lose weight. Men have a slightly higher metabolic rate than women. Most people, when they lose weight, they lose it from the top down. Your face loses the weight first, then like your chest, your belly, your legs and thighs, and you gain it back in the opposite order. Usually, depending on your genetics, that's about what happens. The biggest battle in weight loss is the fight to keep it off. We keep talking about this metabolic adaptation. It is real and it happens, and there's a lot of studies and research coming out about it. Your body will adapt to your new activity level and your new caloric intake. If you're used to eating 5,000 calories a day and you drop it to 3,000, your body will adapt to that 3,000, and eventually you'll stay the same. At some point, you'll plateau and get stuck. Metabolic adaptation, your total daily energy expenditure goes down, and it can stay down for a very long time, years. If you look at the Biggest Loser contestants, even after 6 years, they'd measure their BMR, and it's nowhere near what their predicted BMR should be. Like, it's not even close. It's not just 10 or 15% off. It's like way off their BMR, because for 3 months they did that intense program and ate almost nothing. Their basic metabolic rate went down so low that it was very difficult to even fix or correct. It's a genetically programmed self-defense mechanism to ward off starvation, enhance weight gain storage, and reduces the chance of future diet success and enhances future weight regain. So your body, this is one way that your body can fight off quick changes in weight, and it'll prevent you from losing weight down the road in the future if you try it again, which is also part of the yo-yo dieting thing. There is a buffer of calories, about 200 to 300. If, let's say, your maintenance calories is 2,000, and if you eat somewhere 200 more than that or 200 less than that, your body adapts and you stay at about what you should weigh. Your body weight doesn't change. Your body reduces your NEAT. This is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is like random movements, non-purposeful exercise type movements that you do throughout the day. If you've eaten less calories than usual, your body might have you do less that day. If you've eaten more, it might increase your NEAT so that you can stay at your same maintenance dose. So the keys to fat loss, you want to keep calories as high as humanly possible while still in a deficit. So a person who's eating 3,500 calories a day, have them eat 3,200 or just 3,000. They should lose weight. Do not drop them to 1,200 or 1,500 or 1,600, because that they will adapt to that, and then you have nowhere to go. But if they're losing weight at 3,200 and you keep them at 3,200, if they ever get stuck, you can drop them to 2,800 or then eventually 2,600. I mean, you have more leeway to go, but don't drop them unless they get stuck for a good 4 to 6 weeks. Slow maintained weight loss is to protect your lean mass. The slower you lose the weight, the better. If you go into a severe calorie deficit, you will lose muscle, whereas a calorie deficit of 10 to maybe 20% at the most will definitely protect your lean body mass, and you'll only lose fat. Remember, we want to lose fat, not just weight. You also don't want to lower fat too much, especially in men. This will decrease your testosterone. So you don't want to go much lower than about 40 grams a day. Some of these fitness athletes that are going on stage for bodybuilding get down to like 20 or 30, but none of us need to do that. None of our patients. So like 40 to 50 a day, sometimes maybe a little more. Depending on the person. You definitely don't want to crash diet, because then you'll lose a lot of lean body mass. Severe calorie deficits for short periods of time, you'll lose a lot of muscle. You definitely need a calorie deficit, and you definitely need to keep protein high. We'll get into the details of that. The biggest problem I see with people, especially females, they're eating only like 30 to 40 grams of protein a day, men 50 to 60, which is still way too low. You want them to strength train hard, because that sends a signal to your body to retain muscle mass. You may have to add something called refeeds. Now, they've been on a diet for 4 months, they've lost 50 pounds, let's say, and they're kind of stuck, they're not losing any more weight, but they need to. You can do these things called diet breaks and refeeds, which kind of help them reset. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but this is a study called the Matador study, which went into if somebody's been in a long deficit and they've lost a lot of weight, they need a break from it to kind of like reset everything and get them to lose weight again. Greater weight and fat loss was achieved with intermittent, let's see, what was the ER standing for? Energy restriction. Interrupting energy restriction with energy balance rest periods may reduce compensatory metabolic responses and in turn improve weight loss and efficiency. So this is one of the ways that you can break through metabolic adaptation. If a patient gets down to 2,700 calories, not losing weight anymore, they're stuck at 6 weeks, bring their calories back up to like 3,200, let their BMR come up, because it directly correlates with their food intake and their energy expenditure. Let them eat a little more for like 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4. That's a diet break, or a refeed, maybe like 3 to 4 days, and then have them keep going. I'm not going to go into the details. This kind of goes through the details of that study, but definitely important to have these diet breaks with some of your patients to like let their metabolic adaptation recover, so that they're not adapted to that low of a calories anymore. Keeping weight off, they found through the various studies, people who have some kind of cognitive, and these are people that were able to sustain weight loss more than 5 years. They have some kind of cognitive restraint. They're able to, restrict calories, restrict food groups, restrict feeding times, those, short windows of eating. Number 2, they're good at self-monitoring. They track calories, they weigh themselves every day, they look at how they look in the mirror, whatever it might be. They have regular exercise, not because the exercise is actually causing weight loss, but because they formed good habits. If when they lost weight, they would wake up at 5 a.m. every day and go for a walk or go to the gym or whatever it might be, they formed good habits, and they're more likely to maintain the weight loss because they, got used to that. They follow a structured program. Maybe they eat certain kinds of foods every day or certain kinds of meals every day, but they follow a structured program where, at this time I eat this time I eat that. I also found personally, and just in myself, that if you eat breakfast is almost exactly the same thing, and it's always 400 calories or 800, whatever it is, the rest of the day, you know how to budget your calories. Number 5 was also the ability to focus on a long-term goal. They're not in this, like, I'm not losing weight for that wedding in 2 weeks or that, vacation in 2 months. It's a long-term thing. You didn't put the weight on in 10 minutes. You're not going to get it off in 10 minutes. So what happens when somebody plateaus? They get stuck. They're 6 weeks in, they're eating they're eating 2,000 calories a day. They went from 280 down to 230, and they're kind of stuck. So what do you do? What can you do? So there's a few things you can do. You can go on a refeed, like we talked about, or you can reduce their calories slightly, not protein though, just the fat part or the carbs. Just reduce it by an extra 100, 150 calories, or maybe 200. And add in a little more exercise or activity. If they're walking 5,000 steps a day, see if they can get up to 7,000 or 9,000. You could lower their carbs and fat by 5, 10, 15% per day, keep protein the same though, or they can increase their activity. Obviously, this is all relative to their current level. next slide here. So the problem with us is a lot of times our lives revolve around food, whether like, hey, let's go out to eat, let's go to a bar, or, whether it's funerals or weddings or, graduation parties, whatever it is, everyone's always wondering about food. I always tell people, eat to live, don't live to eat. So what causes weight gain? I'm not going to go through the hormones because, this is, I can just read these, but it's a huge, complicated system. I do want to get to the medications. So there are medications that we prescribe people that cause weight gain, and I'm just going to fly through these. You can see them. Paroxetine, especially, I highlighted in red, is one of them. There are also medications that we prescribe to people, and some of them are cardiac, like the ACEs and ARBs and Norvasc and amiodarone and hydralazine. A lot of these have as a side effect weight loss. So the problem is I'll put somebody on an ACE inhibitor or Norvasc or whatever it is, and someone else puts them on trazodone or paroxetine or prednisone, and they gain weight, and now the two medications are fighting one another. So just if one of your patients says, hey, I've been gaining weight, I'm not really sure why, look through their medications and see if there's something going on there. There are medications that are specifically designed for weight loss. I'm sure you've seen some of these: Xenical, Atipex, Qsymia, Bontrel, Contrave, Saxenda. We'll go through each one. And some of these medications are highly controlled substances. In Ohio, for example, you have to have a BMI over 30 or a BMI of 27 with at least one risk factor, like hypertension. Xenical is ally or orlistat. This prevents fat absorption. People have loose, fatty, oily stools or diarrhea. It can cause some weight loss. This one people can buy over the counter. It's called Ally. You lose about 4 to 6 pounds per year. Atipex, probably the most commonly used one. This is the one that I've used the most because the others are all not generic and super expensive. I think the cheapest we found this at Costco was like 13 or maybe $15 for a month's supply. It affects your hypothalamus to release norepinephrine, also works on other tissues to release epinephrine to break down stored fat. It's a stimulant, it's a catecholamine basically. It also releases small amounts of serotonin and dopamine, which suppress your reward center in your brain. They're an appetite suppressant. You don't feel happy anymore when you eat. It's an anorexigenic or anoretic. Basically, it makes you lose your appetite. You don't feel hungry anymore. There were issues with pulmonary hypertension and valvular heart disease when it was fenfluramine or dexafenfluramine. This is back in the 90s when it was fen-phen, when it was like phentermine and fenfluramine. They've taken the fenfluramine part out and it's no longer fen-phen. And this part, sometimes we'll check an echo on someone just to make sure they're okay. You can do that. The chances of it causing pulmonary hypertension is not, and I see your question, Tina, just give me a second. Significant pulmonary hypertension and heart disease. So just make sure if they have those risks or don't have an echo recently, just check it. There is a tolerance to the effect. Like you'll put people on this and they will say, after about 2 to 3 weeks, it's just not working anymore. I'm back to hungry again. I'm eating again. Weight's starting to go back up. A lot of people ask me, well, can you put a patient who's hypertensive on Atipex? Well, sure. Just like caffeine, the stimulant effects. Okay, that's a tricky one, Joyce, but just wait. So the stimulant effects of caffeine and Atipex, usually for the first 2 or 3 days, they will have that. They'll be like a little more anxious, kind of like with Adderall too. They'll be a little more anxious, a little more nervous. Their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up. But once you've been on caffeine and or Atipex, these type of medications, for about 4 or 5 days, those effects all go away and your blood pressure should go back to baseline and your heart rate. So just be aware of that. And if you tell the patient that ahead of time, they might like you. If they go home and they're like, oh my God, I started taking this medicine and I feel crazy. Well, okay, just give it a couple days. There is a chance of amphetamine abuse. It has stimulant side effects. The withdrawal is the opposite. It makes you feel fatigued, sleepy, lack of motivation. Avoid alpha blockers and antidepressants. Qsymia is a phentermine Topamax combo. We just talked about phentermine. So Topamax is an anticonvulsant, usually used for migraines. It's a modified fructose excreted in the urine. It can make you sleepy and gives people neurological, psychological type side effects. But the nice thing about Qsymia is you can be on it all year. Atipex, you can be on it for 3 months straight, and they have to meet with you once a month, and you have to have a signed, handwritten prescription. It cannot be electronically sent. They have to get a handwritten prescription. They have to meet with the physician once a month, and they can only be on it 3 months in a row. Then you have to be off of it for 6 months, and then you can go back on it again. Glycemia, you can be on it all year, but it's expensive. It's a low dose of phentermine. I think it's like 7.5, and a small dose of Topamax. I think they picked like 49 or 45 or something like that, just a weird dose to make it, not generic. Bontril, I'm not going to go through this. It's very similar to Adipex. I've never used this one. It's kind of an older medication, but it has no issues with valvulopathies, but it's almost exactly like phentermine. Contrave is a bupropion naltrexone combination. You could prescribe these separately, and sometimes you can prescribe them differently, but bupropion, the way it works is it inhibits your reward center in your brain. You'll find people quit smoking on this too, but they don't feel that reward when they smoke and or eat. Their brain just doesn't feel happy. So a lot of people quit smoking and or eating. Naltrexone is similar. It suppresses appetite through the POMC system. There is a synergistic effect on weight loss. They affect the hypothalamus, and you lose about 11 to 16 pounds a year, or about 5% of your starting weight. Saxenda is a newer medication. It's an injectable. It basically is Victoza. It's liraglutide. It's Victoza, but at a higher dose. So a lot of your patients, and the problem with Saxenda is it's super expensive and almost no insurances approve it, but you can, if you got your patients on Victoza, you can tell them to inject a little bit more. It's usually about double the dose of the actual Victoza. Luckily now we have also Ozempic and Rybelsus, which is a pill, which actually works really well. But none of these technically cause low blood sugar reactions unless they're on some other stuff. But just be careful. You might have to cut back some of their other diabetes medications. But this does work, and luckily we have Rybelsus now, which is a pill form of this. I'm not going to go through the Saxenda studies, but they work. So the way I would treat my patients, number one, I always want to get them on diet. They have to diet. They have to learn how to eat right first. If I'm going to put them on something like Adipex, we have to maximize a short period of time on drugs. Lose weight to as low as you possibly can till you're stuck. Here's some Adipex for 3 months. Let's see how you do for the next 6 months. They have to frequently check in with the visits with the physicians. They need a social support system. If their family is not with them or their spouse is not helping them or doing the same thing, it's kind of hard. There are phone apps that will go through diet resources, daily weigh-ins that gives you accountability. If you're weighing yourself every day, you know how to adjust your day based on that. The goals of a perfect diet would be something cheap and free, good for your health, easy to follow, doesn't require a master's degree, sustainable long-term. And that's the most important thing. It really is adherence. Pick something that actually works for you. I don't care what diet you want to do, as we've noticed and looked up so far, they all work. You just have to pick something you can adhere to or your patient can adhere to. Doesn't rely on fads or trends, isn't dangerous, is one of the more important things. Yeah, you could drink water only for 3 months. You'll lose weight, but it's not very healthy. Make sure it's something evidence-based, and make sure they develop a healthy relationship with food. That's really, really key. We shouldn't tell our patient that this is a good food or this is a bad food. Foods have different values. You can eat Pop-Tarts and lose weight if you want to, but it's not that nutritious. You're missing out on a lot of vitamins and minerals. Eat a salad with chicken or salmon or whatever you want to do. But we want our patients to have a good relationship with food. You want to eat a donut every morning? Sure, eat a donut, but you're not going to be able to eat a whole lot more the rest of the day. So the diet part is very important. So your weight times 12 to 14 is usually your maintenance calories. So for somebody who weighs about 200 pounds, you're looking at 24 to 2,800 calories for men. For women, it's slightly less than that. To lose weight, you want to multiply your weight by 10 for a good calorie deficit. So about 2,000 calories should cause weight loss for most people. The protein you got to keep high. We're talking about 0.7 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass for our 200-pound person. That's like 140 up to maybe 240 grams of protein, depending on how much the person weighs. But we're assuming 200 pounds here. And this is the key. Like a lot of people say, well, I'm only eating 2,000 calories a day. And then you look at their food log and they're eating only 30 grams of protein a day. Well, it's very hard to lose weight like that. Protein, first of all, actually induces fat loss, and it increases your muscle mass and protects your muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit. But it does have ergogenic effects where it actually induces fat burning. The rest of your calories can be any combination of carbs or fat. You want to eat more fat? Sure. You want to eat more carbs? Sure. You want something more balanced? Fine. Just make sure it adds up to 10 times your weight. Energetics of obesity and weight control. Does diet composition matter? We've gone through this a lot. Protein being high helps with satiety and is likely what causes more weight loss on higher protein diets. We've gone through that. The calories out part, like I said, it's very difficult to change. Don't eat back the calories that you burn off. Your Apple Watch or your smartwatch tells you I burned 200 calories today. I'm not going to eat an extra 200 calories. Calories and exercise should be independent. We really don't know how much we're burning off, and it is usually capped. Like we said, it's constrained. Your watch or treadmill may be telling you burn 600 calories, but we really have no idea. Body recomposition, this is what we all ultimately want to do. You want to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. It is doable. You get into a calorie deficit and you lift weights. This works in the obese. This works to people who are new to training, new to weightlifting. This works in people who are deconditioned lifters, somebody who's lifted weights before and hasn't done it in a while, like 3-6 months maybe. And then people on anabolic steroids, obviously, it's very easy to gain a lot of muscle and lose a lot of fat. But if your patients, most of mine are obese and have never trained, they can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, which means the scale might not bump as much. They might stay at 240 pounds for a while, but their pants are getting looser, their shirts are loose. They notice other things because they're slimming off fat while gaining some muscle. So MyFitnessPal, I always try to tell my patients to download this app, and I even help them set it up. You want to set up an account, put in your age, weight, sex, height, whatever it is. Do not connect your fitness tracker because we don't want it to allow you to have more calories if you walked longer or exercised. You should adjust your calories to your goal. It will give most patients a reasonable goal and uses pretty good calculations. The only thing I would change, set the protein, carbs, and fat to 40, 40, 20. Most of the times it comes with a 20 for protein and 60 for carbs. I always want protein higher, and if you set it to 40, 40, 20, that gives most patients about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Have them track for 4 weeks, weigh themselves daily, put that in the app as well, and then we can adjust their calories up and down after about 4 to 6 weeks of data. This is about what the app looks like. I'm not going to go through it. If you're not losing weight on the stated amount of calories you're eating or you're supposed to be eating, then start weighing your food in grams and put it in that way, because it has to work if you are doing it correctly. The biggest problem is the diet after the diet. New maintenance calories are going to be lower. So if you were 280 and now you're 180, your new maintenance calories is no longer 3,000 calories. It's probably going to be like 1,800 or 2,200. Your BMR is going to be a little bit lower because your BMR directly correlates with your body mass. Your metabolic rate, if you weigh 300 pounds, is way more than if you weigh 200 pounds. What you can do after this is something called a reverse diet, where you slowly increase your calories over time to increase your BMR and minimize fat gain. And they've studied this. Somebody loses a bunch of weight, and this is their calorie intake, the blue line, the body fat percentage is the yellow line, and TDE is the gray line. Your total daily energy expenditure goes down with the body, with your caloric deficit and your fat loss. If you suddenly jump your calories back up after you've lost all this weight, you suddenly jump your calories back up, you'll notice the fat goes up quickly, and your total daily energy expenditure lags and doesn't go up as much. Whereas if you do it slowly over time, and once you lose all the weight, you go up a little bit in calories 1 week, the next week, your fat gain won't be as much. It won't be like this, and then eventually your total daily energy expenditure will go up and your calories will go up. So you can eat, instead of, you got down to 1,800 calories a day, and now you're eating like 2,500, after this, without putting on a lot of fat. And this is more for like these physique athletes and people who want to get really, really, really low body fat levels. These are some resources. I really like the Macros Inc. calculator to get your initial macros. It'll tell you how many calories to eat and how many not to eat. And they have a Facebook page that's very supportive and useful. If I had to recommend one book, and like I said, I've read almost every single book on weight loss and obesity. Many of them are like complete garbage and somebody's just trying to sell you a book. But if you had to read one single book, if I had to recommend one single one, probably Dr. Blackburn's that I posted earlier. But this would be the one single book that I would recommend. Lane Norton, he's a Dr. Lane Norton, Nutritional Sciences, and this book is very well researched and very, very well done. The golden pyramid of fat loss, number one, you have to have a calorie deficit. Otherwise, nothing else you do matters. Your protein intake has to be about 1 gram per pound of body weight. You should lift some weights. This is mainly to stimulate your muscles so that your body knows it wants to keep muscle. Get some good sleep, throw in a little bit of cardio here and there. Now, this is the fat loss fundamentals. Non-negotiable is a calorie deficit. You have to have a calorie deficit. I can't emphasize that enough. Highly advisable. Make sure your plan is something you can stick to. I don't care what diet or what plan you want to do. If it's something you can do long term, then it works. Keep up with resistance training. And then here's a bunch of stuff that you really don't need to do or not worry about, but a lot of people like to worry about this stuff a lot. How to destroy your diet. You need 2,300 calories to maintain your weight. You eat 1,800 every day. You lift weights every day, Monday through Friday, but then on the weekend, you're up to 3,500. Your average is 2,300, so you're clearly not losing weight. We did this already. So the biggest thing is we want to lose weight and not fat. Your body weight will fluctuate every day because of water, hormones, you ate more salt or soy sauce the night before, but the fat will be coming off slowly and pretty reliably. But the weight on the scale every day is going to bounce around a little, but as long as you see that trend is going down, we're probably okay. We'll skip some of these. This is how you can find me. If you have questions, my email is just mohammedallo@gmail.com. I'll answer some of these questions now. These are my 4 kids. And this is I'm kissing this guy. So I'll answer the questions now. The first question, Dr. Al, have you any experience using vibration therapy for patients that cannot actively exercise during aerobic activity? This is something we did learn about during my certification for personal training. It can work, and it has shown that it does work. There are these machines that people stand on, or there's a belt that can like vibrate them. I'm assuming that's what you mean. But that does work in people who are extremely obese and can't do anything. So any activity is better than nothing. I would highly suggest, though, John, that you definitely get them on a calorie deficit first and foremost. And then they can go from there, because a lot of times people are just so overweight that they can't do anything. I mean, I'm talking about this like some of these 20 and 30-year-old patients that you guys see, but my patients, are beyond that, and they're really overweight and older. So getting them to do activities is not that easy. Sure, a lot of your patients are like that as well, but definitely have them start with a calorie deficit, get some of that initial weight loss off, and then they can start doing simple things like walking. Tina Joyce, any idea on how to motivate unmotivated patient who's frustrated they're not losing weight? So it depends. You can't, you cannot force people to lose weight. I would love for all my patients to lose weight. I've seen thousands and thousands of patients. The amount of patients that have actually lost weight, I could probably count on my hands and toes, because they don't do the things we tell them to do. They don't follow directions. I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that if they don't really want to do it, there's not a whole lot you do. Now, if your patient is really trying hard and wants to do it and wants to lose weight, there's a lot of things you can do. You may actually want to send them to a nutrition coach, and there's a lot of them online, or a registered dietitian, and or get them started with a physical trainer, a personal trainer, to just get them like going and accountable. It depends also on like what is causing the lack of motivation. If their schedule is busy, maybe they need to find a way to do it. If their kids are too much, then maybe they need to get a babysitter. If they've tried everything and it's not working, then they probably need some professional help. There are obesity and weight loss specialist physicians that can maybe help them. But definitely, I think sending them to a nutrition coach, a registered dietitian, or a personal trainer is definitely a way to start. That can help. If that didn't answer your question, or you want to add more details, go ahead. I'll keep reading. The next question, can you use Adipex while on Adderall? So this is kind of tricky. Adderall is a stimulant, and so is Adipex, and they both do kind of the same thing. There's the long-acting version of Adderall, and there's the short-acting. You might want to switch them from one to the other. Adderall in and of itself should cause weight loss. So it's kind of a tricky question. I don't know that I've put people on Adipex that have been on Adderall, but it just depends. You can try the lower dose Adipex. There's a 20 milligram dose instead of the 37.5. Maybe prescribe them the 20s and have them cut it in half, and just because you're putting them on 2 stimulants, have them just try a smaller dose and see if that little dose in addition helps, or just, maybe up their Adderall a little, whichever. Depends on which one they need more. Clearly, if they're on Adderall, they need that. Julie and Aaron Orlowski, you mentioned that BMR decreases with chronic calorie deficit. What are your thoughts on BMR changes in the face of prolonged fasting, both days on end and daily intermittent? So daily intermittent fasting does not really change your BMR that much. This is like the people who don't eat for 18 hours and eat from 1 to 4 or 1 to 6. That's just a way of restricting your calories. That doesn't have a huge, that doesn't have any magical properties other than causing a calorie deficit. Now, if you're not in a calorie deficit and you're eating like 5,000 calories in those 4 or 5 hours, that's going to be a problem. You're not going to get any benefit out of it at all. If you are in a calorie deficit and you're eating less because you're intermittent fasting, then it obviously helps. Your BMR, if you're in a prolonged calorie deficit, will go down. There are people that do these like 48-hour or 72-hour fasts. They can help with like immune response, because all your T cells die and then you have to produce new T cells, and that helps with immunity in a way. But they're really, and you can add more details to your questions if I'm not answering it. But definitely there's no magical properties to intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting. As long as your monthly average caloric intake is less than you need, there should be weight loss, and all of your cardiovascular risk factors will improve. Your BMR will go down. Your BMR is directly related to your weight. If you weigh 300 pounds, your BMR is going to be much higher than somebody who weighs 200 or 120 pounds. I mean, you'll need more calories. Dubose asks, when do you decrease protein intake to prevent decrease in renal function? So they've done studies on how high of a protein intake can you have before you cause renal problems, and you'd have to be eating. They've had people on 3 to 4 grams per pound of body weight a day, and it never caused renal problems. The amount of protein we're asking people to eat, about 1 gram per pound of body weight, is not very much, and even people with terrible kidney function should be fine. Now, obviously, consult your nephrologist if you're in stage 4, stage 5 renal failure. That's a problem. None of my patients are like that. And I'm sure most of yours aren't either. But anybody with like stage 1, 2, or 3, slightly low GFR, they can eat this amount of protein. It's really not a problem. How do you recommend increasing protein without calories? Okay, so this is tricky. This is the biggest problem. Somebody says, well, I'm going to go out and get a ribeye steak. Well, one ribeye could be 1,200 or 1,400 calories. There are pure protein calories, things like egg whites, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt like Faye 0%. There's more to the question. I'm sorry. I tried in spring after your lecture. It was nearly impossible. I added beans to everything, but they are 150 calories, 0.25 per cup. So the problem with beans is they're 80% carbs. So you're adding a lot of calories also from carbs. You must be vegetarian, maybe, I'm guessing. If you are, there are pea proteins and vegetarian protein sources that you can make shakes out of. I usually, when I'm doing this, oh, she loves meat. Never mind. Okay, so you can add egg whites. Egg whites is huge. The most of the calories in the egg are in the yolk, but all of the protein is in the whites. So definitely add in egg whites, cottage cheese, Faye yogurt. You can be creative with that. Beans is kind of tricky because it's mostly carbs, and there is a lot of calories from that. So that's not probably the way to go. I use whey isolate protein. I make a shake every maybe twice a day when I was taking that much protein in. For most women, you want to get about 100 to 120 grams of protein a day, maybe a little more if you weigh more. For most men, you want to be in the 160 to 180 range, depending on how much you weigh. But protein in and of itself causes fat loss. I can't stress that enough. And it also takes away calories from some other things, and it helps you retain your lean body mass. Are there any other questions? I don't see any right now. And if you didn't catch this lecture or you want to review it, you can go to drallo.tv. It'll take you to my YouTube channel. There is a concise version. There's a 15-minute version of this talk that goes through just the major points without every single study. And then there's the long version, which is about this one. Now, I have more studies in this one because I've updated it slightly, but the other one I think is pretty good as well. Any questions? And reach out to me. It's just mohammedallo@gmail.com. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you don't want to post them in a public forum, it should work out. Any questions?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope everyone learned something, and hopefully we can help our patients lose weight and get healthier. Thank you, guys.